Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 13.5 to the public. This is available to all devices that support iOS 13 from the iPhone 6s Plus all the way to the iPhone 11 Pro Max. And so this is available right now to download and install either through iTunes, Finder, or over the air like I did here. Now this came in at 4.16 gigabytes on my iPhone 11 Pro Max, and it was anywhere from 3 to 4 gigabytes on these devices, and that's because they were coming from the beta. Now if you are on the beta or beta 3 or 4, one of those versions, it's going to be a large install. It will be much smaller if you're coming from iOS 13.4.1. You do not need to uninstall the beta profile or anything. You should just be able to check for an update by going to Settings, General, Software Update, check for an update, and you should have it, and you'll be able to install it. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the build number. The build number is 17F75, and this particular build brings a few new features along with some bug fixes as well. So we'll go over them one by one, but before we talk about that, there is no modem update if you're coming from the beta. You may have a modem update if you're coming from iOS 13.4.1 to fix issues like connectivity, for example. So if you were having problems, they hopefully will be resolved with this issue. Now, also, people were asking me, is this update going to fix the VPN issue that we were having as far as not having secure data? And unfortunately, no VPN company has responded to say that yes, it was fixed, and Apple has not mentioned it. So it may or may not be until someone confirms that. So once they do, of course, I'll let you know. Now, the first feature has to do with music. So if we go into music and maybe we're playing a song, if we want to share this song to Instagram stories, we now have the option. So if we tap on the three dots here, tap on share, you'll see that we have the option for Instagram. You'll also have the option for Facebook if you have that. So if you tap on Instagram, it will create the story, and then it will go over to Instagram and it will share the story. So you can share this as a story to Instagram stories or Facebook stories. So it's a nice little update. It just makes it a little bit easier if you're trying to do that. Now, the next thing has to do with Face ID, and specifically if you have Face ID and you're using a mask, so this will make it a little bit easier to unlock your phone. So let me show you what I mean. Now, for example, if you're wearing a mask like this and you want to unlock your phone and you have one that uses Face ID, usually it takes a few swipes up to get to the password prompt. Now, just swipe up, it recognizes that I have a mask and will prompt me for my password. This will work in everything from unlocking your phone to also working with Apple Pay and applications that require Face ID as well. So they've made it a little bit easier if you're wearing a mask. Maybe you're in a store and you want to pay using Apple Pay. It will be easier. Instead of having to swipe up multiple times, it should just recognize you have a mask and be much quicker. Now, the next thing has to do with FaceTime, and a lot of people are using group FaceTime, and so they've added an option to change what's called automatic prominence. So if we go to Settings, and then we go to our settings down here and go to FaceTime, down at the bottom of FaceTime, you'll see it says automatic prominence, and it says during group FaceTime calls, the tile of the person speaking will automatically become larger. And so you can turn this on or off. If you just want to have everyone speaking at once and you don't want the tiles to change constantly based on who's speaking, you can turn that off. It's just a simple tap, turn it on or off, and it's a nice little option for those of you using large group calls. Now with iOS 13.5, Apple has added exposure notifications for contact tracing. Now keep in mind this is turned off by default and cannot be turned on automatically. There is no way to turn it on without your approval. So if you go into Settings and then you go down to Privacy, under Privacy, go to Health, and you'll see Exposure Logging. If we go into this, you'll see it's off by default. And unless you have an app installed that wants to use it, maybe your country has an app they want you to use or something like that, it cannot be turned on. So you need to install that app. Then it will ask you if you want to turn it on. It cannot be installed automatically. Now this will work across iOS and Android phones to let you know, and you can go to exposure checks to see any exposures. So again, it's voluntary. It's completely private and turned off by default. Now, the next thing to go along with Health, Apple has added some updates. So if we go into the Health app, the first time you open it, at the top, it will say Emergency Access to Medical ID. We can review the access to medical ID, And again, this is off by default and only allowed if you want to use it. It's been there for a while, but they're just asking you if you want to review this due to another feature I'll talk about in a moment. So you can review the medical ID, put in your information if you want to, or not put it in at all. It's up to you. Now, going along with that medical ID, there's a new feature that is allowed within iOS if you choose to turn it on, and that has to do with placing a phone call to an emergency service and sharing that information with the person on the other end. Now, it's off by default, but if you wanted to turn it on, you go to Settings, then you go to Health. Under Health, you'll see Medical ID. So if we go into Medical ID, down at the bottom, you'll see it says Share during an emergency call. Again, if you want to share your information, such as your emergency contacts, your height, weight, blood type, things like that, you can share that. It's off by default. I enabled it, so if I place a call or my watch senses a call, it will place that to emergency services and then share this information. Keep in mind that it's completely up to you if you want to share it. And that goes along with watchOS 6.2.5 that was released as well the other day. And that will also do the same thing as long as you have that enabled. If you don't have it enabled, it won't share it. Now, as far as features are concerned, those are all the major features included with this update. There are some bug fixes as well. And the first one has to do with that text messaging crash. So there were some characters, if you messaged someone with those characters, they would actually crash your phone and it would lock up. You could send it in Twitter or in messages or anything else, and it would completely freeze your phone. That has been addressed and fixed in this update. They've also fixed an issue where some users were seeing a black screen when you were trying to play streaming videos from some websites. So if you were trying to stream through Safari and trying to play a video and it showed a black screen, that's now resolved. Now, they've also addressed and fixed an issue in the share sheet where suggestions and actions may not load properly. So for example, if you're going into Safari and maybe you want to share this website, you hit share, your suggestions and actions may not show up. That has been resolved in this update. Now, the final bug fix has to do with the iPad specifically, which is kind of strange because it has to do with the Mail app. And what Apple has said is that it resolves security issues, including some that could lead to unexpected memory corruption or stability issues with the Mail app. And since iOS and iPadOS are basically the same thing with different names, it seems to reason that Apple would fix this on the iPhone as well. But they didn't put it in the notes, so I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but Apple's Mail app does seem a lot better with this particular update. Now, as far as iPadOS, there's nothing different other than what I've already mentioned, with the exception of contact tracing. It doesn't seem to be on the iPad. So if you go to Privacy and you find Health, there is no Health because Apple pretty much monitors that on the iPhone, not the iPad. But all of the other bug fixes and different changes as far as FaceTime should work here, but everything else is the same. Now, as far as battery life is concerned, battery life on the previous beta was quite good for me, and it seems to be doing well on this update as well since Apple released it to developers early, and it's the same thing. So if we take a look at battery life, you'll see my battery health is 98% after 6 months. And as I've mentioned many times before, battery health is simply a measurement of the actual physical battery's health inside the iPhone. This is not something that will change. It's just due to the nature of batteries. So Apple just simply remeasures this every time there's an update and sometimes in between. And so if we take a look at the last 10 days of battery life, you'll see yesterday I had 4 hours and 26 minutes of screen on time, 2 hours and 16 minutes of screen off time. Screen off time refers to maybe playing music, but your screen is turned off. So it's doing something, but the screen is off. And then you'll see over the past few days, my usage has varied greatly, and I could get 10 to 12 hours of screen on time and maybe up to 6 hours of screen off time, all on a single charge. So it seems pretty good, seeming how I used about 50% of my battery, and I had 5 hours and 20 minutes of screen on time. So it's pretty good that way. Now, performance overall has been nice and smooth. Occasionally, there's a bug where I go into settings and there's a little gap at the top. But other than that, nothing seems to be slow. If I go into different apps like music and scroll through, it's nice and fast. And on older devices, I know many of you want to know how it is on, say, an iPhone XR or maybe an iPhone 7 or 6S. I'll show you on the 6S Plus in a moment. But in general, it's very good. It's nice and stable. I haven't seen any crashes or anything. You can see everything basically feels the same as if you were using the newest phone, with the exception of maybe loading a game or something like that. So, for example, on the iPhone 6S Plus here, if we go into the camera, it should open pretty quickly, like you saw there. Maybe we'll go into music. It's nice and fast and loads quickly. And then maybe we'll go into Minecraft. I kind of use this as a benchmark many times as far as going in and seeing how quickly things load. So we'll go to play. We'll just go to my world. It's one I've created before. We'll give it a second to load. And once we're in, frame rates and everything seem to be fine. So for example, if I go here, we'll turn around the corner, go down here, you'll see it's nice and smooth in general. So there shouldn't be any issues even on older devices, but expect battery life to be decent on the old devices as well compared to what you had with 13.4.1. Now, along with this update, Apple released watchOS 6.2.5 the other day, and if you install it, you'll have new watch faces. I covered that in a different video, but you'll see there's new watch faces in here for Pride, and you can customize those with new watch bands and things like that. So if you have an Apple Watch and you weren't seeing these, but you already updated your watch, once you've updated to iOS 13.5, you should start to see those. Now, as far as future versions, many people have asked me, is iOS 13.5 the last one? And I would say probably not. Usually Apple will update these until the fall or autumn, meaning iOS 13.5.1 or maybe even a 13.6, because iOS 14, while it will be shown in June at WWDC along with iPadOS 14 and watchOS 7, Apple does not release it to the public until September usually. So maybe September, October to see that new update. And so keep your eyes open for that. And then, of course, I would expect macOS soon. If it's not out by the time you're watching this video, expect an update soon for macOS. So it just depends on when that comes out. So iOS 14 will have all the new features and things like that. iOS 13 is basically just stability and bug fixes at this point. And if you find anything else, let me know in the comments below. There may be slight tweaks to things like fonts and slight movements in pixels and things, but in general, don't expect a huge change until iOS 14 comes out. Now, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description as I always do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.